Hi, welcome back. I'm Melissa Muir. Today I'm going to talk about two different types of finishers. We have a magnetic pin finisher as well as a rotary tumbler. And the way that they're going to work is a little different as well as the finishes. So let's jump in and take a look at the two of these that are offered by Foredom. So here I have a pin finisher, and I've just started some, so my water's starting to look a little bit more murky, and you'll also notice the foam on there, and that's because I've already been running this one for a few minutes to get this going. Alright, so magnetic pin finisher, what happens is we have a magnet underneath this base, and when I turn it on, that magnet is going to move, and it's going to cause all of the little needles that are inside of this to move with it. And as it does that, it's going to bump up against the pieces of jewelry that we have in there. Now in this case, we can only put in about 200 grams of material. So there's 150 grams of pins. That means that I can put in like another 50 grams worth of jewelry. That's going to be enough for several rings, a bracelet, a pendant. So not too much in there. Now, when we look at a rotary tumbler, we are going to have a barrel that sits on its side like this. And then as it rotates around, these pins that are in this, and the media is a little different than in the magnetic pin finisher. But as this rotates, it's going to take my pieces and it's again going to bump up against my pieces, but now we're doing this in a rotating action that is like this, where it's got a little bit more gravity versus something like everything is bumping into it because the magnet is pushing it that way. The media that gets used inside of a rotary tumbler, in my case, is a stainless steel, and it has different shapes and sizes as well. To give you an idea of what the different pins look like, this is the stainless steel that is going to go inside of the rotary tumbler. You'll see that there's little saucers, there's different polygons, straight pins, all of that. And so we have a variety of shapes that are going to work into nook and crannies. Whereas the pin finisher is going to have these little needles. Okay, and you can see the size difference of these. These needles are going to work into really tidy, fine spots, whereas those for the rotary tumbler are just not going to be able to get into some of those tight spots. Now, the shapes of them are also going to cause a different effect as well. If we're using a larger material or media, as this is called, it's going to rub up against our metal differently. Well, the pins, really what we're doing is we're going to get a texture from the ends of the pins. The sides of these pins are so thin and fine that we're not going to get much from them as far as those bumping and rubbing up against our material. But these are going to act like little tiny hammers. And so the finish that I'm going to get from a magnetic pin finisher is going to be very matte. Whereas the finish that I get from a rotary tumbler is going to be one that's more burnished, polished, and smooth. The barrel for the magnetic pin finisher has facets in here, and that's going to help that as my pieces and these pins rotate around, they're going to get agitated by each of these facets, which is then going to stop my pieces and allow those pins to come in and hammer up against it. So you'll notice that on the rotary tumbler, the barrel is not round, but rather hexagonal. And again, that is going to help with my pieces so that they will kind of hold into place a little bit as it rotates and allows these pins to run up against them, and that's what's going to cause our burnishing action. Now the pin finisher, like I said, can hold 200 grams, and that means that if I've got 150 grams in here, that means I can put in 50 grams of jewelry. That's 1/10 of a pound. Whereas in my rotary tumbler, I can have up to 3 pounds. So if I have 2 pounds of pins in here, or this media, then that means I can put in up to 1 pound of jewelry. They are going to work a little differently. Now, as far as how long does it take to get things finished, my pin finisher is going to work much faster. The rotary tumbler is going to help a little bit with the hardening action. Now this is not going to do a lot of hardening, so it's not going to be the same as if I hit a piece with a hammer. Now one thing about the pin finishers is that if I have really tiny fine areas like this woven piece here on my bracelet, this is full of pins because they're going to work their way into those tight little areas. That would not necessarily be a problem if I were to put it into the rotary tumbler. However, that rotary tumbler is also not going to get into each of those fine little grooves with that weave. To load my piece into the magnetic pin finisher, all I have to do is drop it on, put the lid on, and then I can start my machine and I'm ready to go. The rotary tumbler is going to have a watertight seal. Okay, so in order for me to open this, I'm going to release the latch, remove the top pin that holds everything into place, and then I can remove the top. There is a rubber seal right here around this that when I put this on and then lock it into place, it pushes that pressure down and gives us that watertight seal. Now, in the rotary tumbler, I only want to fill up to this black line here, so about halfway full. And on the pin finisher, there is a little line on here that is labeled that tells us where our fill level is. We've got a minimum and we also have a maximum, but I always shoot for that middle of the range. Now, to load our rotary tumbler, I'm just going to take my pieces. Some of these are finished, some of them just have a little bit of tarnish, and some of them still kind of have that milky white look after soldering. So I'm just going to drop those in, close this up, and now we're ready to go. So for each of them, I'm just going to turn on their power, and then I'm going to do whatever settings I'm after. And you can look at their respective videos to figure out how each of these machines work. But in this case, I'm going to slow things way down because this particular rotary tumbler goes very fast. I like mine to rotate probably at about a speed of 15, and then I can set my timer or whatever else, and I can even change my direction. And then all I have to do now is hit start here. To start this one, I just make sure that my power is on, and I'm going to rotate this timer, and that's going to tell me how long it goes. Once it hits that, I'm going to hear a ding, and it will turn everything off. Now again, this is going to work much faster. My pieces and my water will heat up as this action happens. This one, I'm not going to heat up quite as much with the friction, but there will be a little bit of heating up that happens. So we'll get these both started and we'll check back in a few minutes to see how far we've come. Okay, it's been about 7 minutes, and let's just kind of see how things are. I can already feel this one starting to heat up. You'll notice that I've got a lot of suds here, and that was due to my burnishing compound. I forgot to put burnishing compound in this one, so no suds yet. The burnishing compound isn't necessary, but it does make it so that things run a lot more smoothly. So if we pull this out, go in for some of my pieces. Now here's the thing that's going to happen. If you've got something, this happens to be a hollow form with a lot of pierce work, it's full of this media. So that's something that you'll want to be aware of with both tumblers, that if you have open cavities like that, you're going to definitely run into that as well. So here I've got a little bit cleaner. It's getting more of that bright finish back onto it. This was pretty well tarnished, and you can see it still is. When I pull out some of these rings, if you remember, some of them had kind of a matte finish to them because they had just come out of the pickle. And now they have a really nice bright shine to them. They look nice and polished. Not completely yet because again, it's only been in there for about 7 minutes. But if I leave them in there for an hour or more, they're going to be really nice and bright and shiny. Now if we take a look at some of these items that were in the magnetic pin finisher, here's a piece right here. I'll notice that it's now much cleaner than it was. It was starting to get a lot of surface tarnishing that was happening. It's now much brighter, but it also has a matte finish to it. Looking at this bracelet, again, everything is looking really good, especially in these tiny little crevices, but I also noticed that it is full of the little pins, so I'm going to have to go through and make sure I remove all these little pins so that I don't have anything poking me as I'm trying to wear it. So that gives you kind of a brief look at the magnetic pin finisher versus a rotary tumbler. Again, magnetic pin finisher is going to give me more of that matte finish, whereas the rotary tumbler is going to give me more of a burnished look, and that's going to take me into more of a high polished look. This is not polishing. The polishing process actually involves removing or moving that metal. This is just burnishing. So you want to make sure that you know the difference there. The magnetic pin finisher does get my surface to a nice even level that I find it is then easy to take it to a higher polish afterwards. But even that will happen to an extent here with my rotary tumbler. In both cases, they are going to help reduce some sharp edges. So if you have things that you've filed and you just want to make sure the edges are smooth, both of them are going to help with that. However, they're not going to alleviate it completely. As always, if you have questions, make sure you leave comments down in the comment section and we'll get back to you. There are videos on each of the specific tumblers and finishers so that you can take a little deeper dive into those. Make sure you subscribe, ring that bell, and mark that you want all notifications so that you don't miss any of the other tool reviews that I do. And thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you guys next time.